Hello Martin.
Hi.
Thank you for agreeing to be interviewed. My first question to you today is, can you just tell us a bit about yourself, what you do, etc.?
Yeah, sure. My name's Martin Hemmings. I'm a freelance translator. I've been doing that for about 3 years now. I translate French and Russian into English. In terms of areas of expertise, I didn't really start out with any particular area of expertise. I'm a linguist by trade, so really I just kind of felt my way into the areas that I'm working in now. I mainly work in software and web localization. That's kind of my specialist area, and there's also an area of research interest as well. And I also do a lot of sort of transport, urban planning, environment, waste management type stuff, and a little bit of general stuff on the side as well.
How long have you been working as a translator?
I've been doing that for 3 years. Prior to that, I was a school teacher for 3 years, a French teacher, but I decided I wanted a career change and still wanted to stay working in languages, so thought really that translation was a good way to go. So I did the MA course at Salford in translation, and I've been doing that ever since.
Okay. So this is the training you had. You've got the MA in translation.
Yeah, I've got a undergraduate degree in French and Russian, followed by a teaching qualification, and then the MA at Salford. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, as much as this is possible, could you tell us a bit your typical week?
Okay. Essentially, my typical week really depends upon what my clients want from me. I guess, on an average day I get up at around about sort of 8 o'clock in the morning, something like that. Normally having sort of planned my day out the night before, or if it's a Monday, on the Friday. I try not to work weekends, but obviously that does happen occasionally, when your urgent jobs come in from clients. Many of whom don't seem to think that translators have a life of their own outside translation, but that's something you have to educate them about. I can work anything from sort of, maybe 4 or 5 hours a day up to 10, 11 hours a day sometimes. And I wouldn't really say that there's anything like a typical week in freelance translation. I'd say, it's more like, things do happen in cycles, maybe sort of month-long cycles of work with regular clients, but really it's quite haphazard. And you have to kind of organise your own life around that, really.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
For me, that's a good thing. That could be seen as a downside of the job, but I think actually it does allow you some flexibility. If I want to go out and do something in the afternoon, then I have the flexibility to do that and come back in the evening and maybe do 2 or 3 hours work before I go to bed in the evening instead. So, in that sense, I actually quite like that way of organising my time. Okay.
So this is obviously an interesting aspect of the job. Do you have anything else that you found really interesting about it?
Being freelance, it was really a kind of a new adventure for me. You really have to, being your own boss, as the cliche goes, is really quite a daunting thing to do at first. But I think that's probably the most interesting aspect of all, is that to the extent to which work comes in from clients, and that always limits you a little bit in terms of what they want, but really not just being able to organise your own time, but also having to learn to be disciplined enough to manage your money and your finances and your taxation properly and all that stuff, which was completely alien to me when I started. And I would say that's really interesting. It's kind of taught me a lot about not just improve my language skills, but I think improve my business skills, improve my self promotion and all that kind of thing as well. Really just selling myself, which you have to do, because no one's going to give you work as a freelancer unless you go out and ask for it. Yeah.
Yes, that's very true. Okay, what about the disadvantages? Are there any, and what are they?
Besides the the sort of very haphazard working hours, which I mentioned before, there is, or there can be, if you allow that to be the case, quite a sort of isolated nature to the job. That old cliche of the translator sitting in a dark room surrounded by a pile of books working on his or her own can be true to a certain extent, but I think now with sort of modern communications in terms of online messaging, Skype, instant mobile phone contact, that kind of thing, that helps to kind of keep in touch with people throughout the day. Also, there's a lot more tendency for sort of teamwork and that kind of thing these days as well. Between translators, in translator teams, translators and reviewers and proofreaders. So I would say actually that whilst you don't have that sort of staff room or colleague type atmosphere that you would have if you were working, say, in a school, which was my experience, or in a company, you can make a kind of social aspect of the job yourself if you put your mind to it. I mean, you can allow yourself to become completely isolated, and that's happened to me from time to time, but I've realised that you do have to keep in contact. And you have things like networks, like the Northwest Translators Network, for example. You've got things like that are very useful for kind of keeping in contact, as well as online communities and that kind of thing as well. So I think that's a little bit of a myth, really, and I don't think it's quite so true these days as maybe it once was.
It's what you make of it, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And how do you keep up with the evolving foreign languages you work with?
It's quite hard to do. You have to put a conscious effort into do it. I think so the example of a native English translator, French to English translator, living in France, for example, would have the benefit of day-to-day contact with French culture, French media, French people, and the evolving French language. Whereas, if you're living in your native country, you have to put a lot of effort in. I try every morning to sort of, while I'm having breakfast or something, to browse through French news websites and that kind of thing. Obviously, you've got sort of TV5, which is quite good as well. And of course, I mean, it's when you are a translator, you tend to have a very sort of international group of friends and colleagues and contacts. So you can always kind of bounce ideas and questions off each other all the time, and kind of keep improving your language that way as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. And but your other skills, what other skills do you think you need to be a good translator?
I think you've got to be... One of the most difficult things that I found is being able to accept criticism. Yes. You put however many hours or days into a piece of work, and it comes back with sort of yellow highlighter or red markings all over it, and you think you start to get a little bit like, how dare you criticise my translation type attitude. But I think you have to get over that, and you have to realise that there is no one right answer to any translation, just because of the nature of it. And often most of the sort of the figurative red pen all over your work, if you like, is more kind of stylistic differences more than anything else. And you've got to be able to filter out what is actually a mistake, if you've made a mistake, and say, okay, I hold my hands up, I've made a mistake here, and learn to negotiate compromises with people. I would also say, obviously, before, when I mentioned being able to promote yourself is essential, with humility, of course, not boasting about how amazing you are in 17 languages, because you will come unstuck, and therefore also realising your limitations.
Yes.
For me, for example, my French is a much stronger language than my Russian, and there are some occasions where I may have no work on, and a Russian job may come in, and I'm kind of tempted to take it on because I think, well, I've not got anything else coming in, but actually I think it's going to cause me more problems in the long run, because I'm not really competent or capable in that particular area in Russian to be able to take that job on, for example. So you have to know when to turn work away as well, even if it's to your financial detriment. In the long run, it will be to the advantage of your reputation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. And you said you went freelance straight away. You've never worked in-house.
No, I haven't. No.
Why is that, and what do you think about in-house?
For me, the reason that I went into translation in the first place was I always wanted to be freelance. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to try out a completely different way of structuring my working life and organising my time, and that was only my ever goal. Only ever my goal was to become a freelance translator. I think with hindsight, maybe I would have benefited from working in-house possibly for a year, maybe just to, just to have, not to have to have learned all of these downfalls, these pitfalls myself, possibly have someone standing over me and going, okay, here are the problems that you may encounter, this sort of thing. Obviously, everyone mentions the financial side of it. I mean, if you're working in-house, you know what your salary is, and you've got the financial security, in terms of things like your credit rating and all this sort of stuff as well. You've got that sort of financial security. Freelance, you're either, you're at one extreme or the other, really. It very much depends upon, I don't know, the toss of a coin, really. I don't know to what extent there's any kind of structure to it. Overall, I do prefer freelance, I think. I mean, I have friends and colleagues who work in-house, and they do enjoy that. And they also get the benefit of seeing the other aspects of the translation profession, like project management and things, which I don't get as a freelancer. But for me, working freelance was purely a personal decision, and I don't think I'd have it any other way.
Okay. And do you have any last tips for somebody who would like to start becoming a freelance or an in-house translator?
Do I have any last tips? I would say go for it. I think if you're in a position where you can afford perhaps to be poor for a while to begin with, because especially if you're going to be freelance, that's almost guaranteed to happen, certainly for the first maybe year, 2 years, depending upon market conditions and that sort of thing. What I did was I actually started marketing myself whilst I was still teaching, because I knew I was going to make that transition. So if it is something you want to do, yes, it's worth it in the long run, but make sure you plan ahead financially.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very good piece of advice there.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Martin.
Thank you, Cindy.